Thank you so much. Welcome, sir, to the Positive Wellbeing Association platform. It's an honour to have you on board. And I'd just again like to thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm actually quite pleased and I'm happy to be here and talk to you.
Thank you so much. Being such an honourable member of the International Positive Psychology Association and having done some research into character strengths, how would you summarise a review of positive psychology character strengths?
Yes, it is actually a very historic topic, but then renewed. We have to go back into history, and let's say personality psychology was concerned with intelligence or ability, temperament, and character. But then, probably due to the influence of Gordon Allport and others, character became out of fashion because the idea was we shouldn't evaluate people, we should describe them, and therefore Allport meant character is not a good term, we should study personality. But positive psychology brought a renaissance of character research, basically because we observed that good outcomes in life are indeed related to the positive traits, so it makes sense to study character again. And that's actually the accomplishment of a group of people in America, mostly Chris Peterson, Martin Seligman, but also the group around them. Their idea was, well, if we look into the roots of a good life, so what makes a life worth living, we have to look for external factors, but also internal factors. And that's why the idea came up, we need to look into characteristics that predict good outcomes in life. So things that we want a fulfilled life, we want to be happy, we want societal recognition, we want friends. And therefore they started to look for characteristics that might predict those things. And it was actually quite an accomplishment, lasting over several years, starting with a smaller list to then eventually arriving at a model that distinguishes. So overall, I mean, they found that when you study lists of virtues by philosophers over 2,000 years all over the world, people who did found religion, that a certain list of virtues appear everywhere by the same name or by different names. And they saw that wisdom is something that's universally valued, courage, humanity, justice is what we like, and temperance and transcendence, although that term wasn't used that frequently. So that's a sort of first orientation in the field of positive traits. But virtues are very broad and general, so they looked into mechanisms, basically character strengths, that help achieving those virtues or living them. So this list of 24 strengths emerged, and I think it's all well known, so I don't really need to repeat it in detail. But the idea was that curiosity, judgment, love of learning would support wisdom, courage would be related to perseverance, honesty, and a few others. And the same for humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. So that's basically the model. Mm-hmm. But then if you look into the dictionary, we have thousands of trait terms, and many of them have a positive connotation. Mm-hmm. So the crucial question was, when is a positive strength actually a character strength? And therefore, they developed criteria, and this is what, let's say, helped shaping the model. So, of course, character strengths are traits. They're unipolar traits, so we only appreciate the strong expression of a strength. Mm-hmm. The important criterion is strength should be positive traits that lead to fulfillment in life. So the criterion was any of the strengths that they will list should lead to a good outcome in life. But then strengths should be morally valued. They shouldn't diminish others. They should rather elevate others. So seeing someone displaying the strengths actually makes me feel better, and so on. So there's a lot of criteria which finally led to this model of 24 strengths and 6 virtues. When they completed the book in 2004, they actually said, that's the first draft. It was actually a quite good draft, quite finished. But they also said, well, we will see what the future will hold, whether we need to drop strengths or maybe add others. Right now, the model still is in the same shape, and there are measurement models that, measurement instruments that help assessing them, and a lot of research is done currently.
Okay, thank you so much for actually explaining the whole journey of character strengths and how it's gone from a mere concept of personality traits to actual, well-devised and categorized character strengths that have been devised in positive psychology contexts, whereby they've been divided into virtues as well. So thank you so much for explaining that journey. Would you say, how would you say that positive psychology practitioners can practice these character strengths in an optimal manner? So in light of your research into positive psychology traits that obviously advocate positive emotions and positive outcomes, how would you say they would advocate the positive psychology traits such as orientations to happiness and cheerfulness? And I know you've done so much work on humour. I love humour. I think I have teenagers, and you have to have a good sense of humour when you have teenagers. So just obviously in light of your research, how would you say positive psychology practitioners can really optimally use these character strengths, and how would you sort of use your research knowledge to actually say how they could implement it?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's also a question that is partly easy to answer, but partly not, because we will still have a lot of things to do in the future. But the implementation, I think, is partly guided by research. We have done a lot of studies. So basically the first study done by Peterson, Park, and Seligman looked into whether the strengths actually predict happiness or life satisfaction, which was the criterion. And they could see through several studies, and we replicated it in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, that there are certain strengths that correlate quite well with life satisfaction or happiness. Others are lower, but some are very good. So some happiness strengths like hope, zest, love, curiosity, gratitude. And from those we know there's a correlation between having these strengths to a higher extent and being more satisfied with your life. With it, take this as a first hint to actually do an intervention study where we had people practicing those strengths that are highly correlated with life satisfaction. These are low related with life satisfaction. The interesting outcome was that both profited from both interventions were liked by participants. They thought they were effective, but we could see a steeper increase indeed in those that practiced those happiness strengths. We had a group meeting, some homework, so that's participating in a study, but still you can derive some outcome if you are a practitioner. because indeed practicing hope, zest, love, curiosity, gratitude, humor does raise the level of happiness, and that's what we found. So one selection could be depending on what your prime aim is. Do you want to go for, I want to have a stronger increase in life satisfaction, then probably implementing those things into daily routines. Now for gratitude, we have those 3 good things interventions. We have the gratitude letter, so that's what you can do. But we actually varied those and also had the 3 funny things intervention or 9 beautiful things. So just keeping a journal over a longer period of time where you write down things that you encountered, whether you were grateful for them or whether they were amusing, or most of the strengths have this emotional component. So keeping diaries, doing this exercise every evening is actually one of the best researched interventions. So this is what can be used. Most positive interventions are rather brief, like the one that I said, but there are also more, let's say, more profound, longer going, constructed interventions, like the humor intervention that we have, where we actually have 7 steps that you go through. They are going from very simple to very elaborated. So for example, just remembering how your sense of humor was when you were a child. What did you laugh about when you were young? What did really crack you up at school and private life? Just getting in touch with the playful side of you, remembering the child in you, and so just remembering how it felt to have fun. So that's one of the earliest steps. Then we build upon it. In our group training, we have working on laughter. So work on a good belly laugh rather than just smile or inhibit laughter. Then there are some techniques how to improve telling jokes or even coming up with your own spontaneous humor. What I think personally very important is finding humor in daily life. There are so many things that are unintentionally funny, and just spotting the incongruities in life in general. So these are the more difficult parts, but it even gets worse. Learn laughing about yourself, so the mishaps that happened, or even the body parts that you don't like, all the things that are not that great about you. Try to see them from a funny perspective. That's the most difficult, of course, but it works. And then putting all those things together so that you are well prepared to cope with stress when the time comes. So that's more elaborate training, where you don't only count certain things or write them down or memorize them or building a humor journal, but here it's really building up the skills from very simple to more complex. And that's what I think we will see more in the future, how to utilize each strength better than we did in the past. Humor is actually quite ahead because, for example, we have this 8-step program by a good friend of mine, Paul McGee, a pioneer in humor research. And he had a scientifically founded humor training, and we were one of the first to test it, and we could really see that it improves life satisfaction. And life satisfaction stays high, at least for the time period that we did test, namely for 2 months. So humor is something very easy to implement. A short version of this training now we brought into the workplace, and it seems to work. But practitioners, I think, should also see where they are actually. I mean, we thought when you train your signature strengths, so your highest strengths or your lowest strengths, it makes a difference. Now we thought, depending on where your overall strength level is, it might be better to train a low developed strength or a highly developed strength. So people who are generally low in the strength level do profit from training the signature strengths. So in the settings that we had before, let's say taking half an hour in the evening, think about that strengths, plan what you can do tomorrow, what could be situations, what behavior do you show that is in accordance with this strengths. And then just do it, and then the next evening reflect, how did it work, how did I feel, what can I do better, and so on. So just developing these strengths. We thought that people who are low in strengths overall profit from training their signature strengths only. Whereas those who already have a lot of strengths, they actually gained the most when they did train their least developed strength. So you can see it's quite complex. We have an arsenal of trainings, but still I expect there to be more in the future, and also that research will be there to tailor it to the needs of the individual.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely amazing to see that there's so much research being done into those key areas whereby you have those options as a positive psychology practitioner to cultivate positive emotions. I must say I will be trying the humour research that you recommended strongly, because I feel that is such a key sort of driving force. It's like hope. It gives that inner sort of motivation for individuals to experience moments of laughter, moments of positive emotions. So just cultivating an all-round sort of a more wholesome, positive well-being. Leading up to my next question, could you elaborate on any connections, obviously, between the character strengths that you have extensively researched into the PERMA model? Because obviously the PERMA model has again been much researched and obviously is like a sort of like a framework in itself. I would say it wouldn't be a big statement to say it's a sort of institution in itself for positive psychology, because it has so many good attributes in itself, the model does, that you can really, really see its benefits for any society out there. So could you please make some connections between the character strengths that you have researched and the PERMA model, please?
Yes. Well, the good news is all strengths are good for something. Remember at the beginning I said Peterson, Seligman and this group of researchers looked for characteristics that will predict good outcomes in life. And for a certain time, life satisfaction was the only criterion that was used. And there, for example, appreciation of beauty or modesty didn't really predict life satisfaction. So this is when we thought happiness is unidimensional, well-being is unidimensional. Now, the good news is now we can see that really every strength predicts something good. The bad news is it's very complicated. I can tell you it's not rocket science, but I'm just saying it's more a net of predictors and criteria that somehow interrelate, and you don't have strong one-to-one relationships. But I can tell you what we did and what the outcome is roughly. We had one study, one article that we published where we could analyze 5 data sets where we used the character strengths in self-report, in peer report, meaning your best friend judged a person, so that we don't have a method bias. So 5 such measures of character strength. and then we used a measure of PERMA.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say across all 5 studies, there were certain relationships that were consistent, that
Mm-hmm.
appeared in every study. And they are quite plausible, and I can tell you them in a minute. Then we had less consistent relationships, but still quite consistent. And this makes it a little bit complicated, because if we look at the overall picture, many strengths are good for many elements of the PERMA model. Mm-hmm. So right now we just have a rough draft. But if you look in the P of PERMA, positive emotions, and here it is again, humor is one of the 3 strengths that consistently relates to positive emotions, which is simple because humor leads to amusement, but it also, humor prevents that you get immersed too much into negative emotions. So humor is a coping mechanism. So humor is good for positive emotions. As is hope, which is basically positive emotions about feelings about the future, and zest. So these 3 are the ones that are strongly, consistently relating to P, zest, hope, and humor. So if you want to raise the P part of PERMA, these are the 3 to go for. Now, you wouldn't be surprised that engagement, life of engagement, having flow experiences, when you take on challenges in private life or work life, that it requires more strengths. Originally, these were thought to be the element that is mostly strengths related. And there we have a long list to get into flow, to get into activities. Creativity helps, curiosity, you have to find something that interests you, love of learning while you are engaged in solving something you learn. You stick to it, so persistence is important. Zest is a motor of keeping you going, and self-regulation. So if you are already thinking of stopping, well, it still gives you an idea that you move on. And we also found leadership. So engagement has a longer list of strengths that predicted quite consistently. Positive relations, you wouldn't be surprised that this is, of course, relating to the strengths of humanity. So love is there in each of the studies, kindness and teamwork. And just as a plug-in, these are the 3 that are, of course, related in all studies. Humor just missed it because of one study, but humor is one thing that brings people together as well. So laughing about the same things is quite important. So humor is also quite good for positive relations. Then meaning, here of course we are in the field of the transcendence strengths. So spirituality, gratitude, and appreciation of beauty are indeed the strengths that predict meaning the best. But also perspective, which is an element of wisdom and curiosity and social intelligence. So this transcendent and wisdom-related strengths are good for building meaning. And the accomplishment is usually well correlated with engagement in our studies. And we also see that this accomplishments component has a lot to do with perspective, persistence, and zest. So these are the 3 that are most highly related. Now we could go into mechanisms, why this is so, but this takes quite long. Just to mention, if we look into, well, not all 5 studies, but 4 of them, then we have a list of 4 to 7 strengths that add to each of the PERMA components, still in a very meaningful way. So we have a broad choice of strengths that we could train if we want to specifically target individual components of PERMA. So the strengths are related. The PERMA independent components, but still emerge in the same people. But I think PERMA is quite a good model. But if we go back into the beginning of positive psychology, then there were more criteria. It's not only your own well-being. What about social recognition? Mm-hmm. What about other things? We did a study that will be published soon, which will also help understanding that strengths are good for your position in society or in your group. We did look into people that got awarded by the state, let's say in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Mm-hmm. Usually, by the turn of the year, the president would invite certain people that have been nominated for extraordinary deeds. Often they were lifesavers or they did something for society. So we approached those institutions, political institutions mostly, and mm-hmm. asked to connect us to those people who were awarded. Mm-hmm. Because our assumption was that those people that really get recognized by their surrounding as being extraordinary or having done something special, they should have higher scores in most character strengths, and they should probably also be higher in life satisfaction if the strengths lead to life satisfaction. And without really giving away all the outcomes, but I would say with the exception of fixed strengths, all the others were significantly higher in the group of people that got those awards. So character strengths not only improve your well-being, it also improves your societal recognition. And that's, I think, going beyond the PERMA model. But PERMA is still, I mean, as a well-being, it's the benchmark that we need. We also looked into friendships, which is, of course, part of relationship, but we looked into schools, who are the most liked children and who had the strongest relationships. So I'm nominating someone else as my best friend, and the other one is nominating me as well. Lisa Wagner did this study, a doctorate. And there we also see character strengths predict the friendships. And our current project, just to end on this note, is we look into the aged population. We want to go to people who are in the last fifth of their life, maybe, and see what quality of life they have, how many friends they have, how many people come visit them, how fit are they. And that's an additional component that we hope to relate to character strengths. So overall, character strengths are really helpful in life.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for actually sharing your actual comprehensive, in-depth PERMA model and connection with character strengths. People find it very difficult to allocate the actual character strengths within the 5-dimensional framework. You've done it so beautifully. Thank you so much. And sharing your present research regarding children and the emphasis of friendships, and how, obviously, in your later years, how people cope with quality of life within their latter years is an interesting concept, I think, with the aging population and everybody seeing that what positive living or what life satisfaction is all about at that latter age and at early development of children is absolutely amazing research that I think everybody can actually really appreciate. And I feel that coming to the final question, obviously, it's about achieving the worldwide sort of target that Martin Seligman, founding father of positive psychology, has set, that, we'd like to raise worldwide well-being by 52% by the year 2051. I find that an absolutely amazing concept. I seem to repeat it again and again because I think it's an honourable cause that people like yourself and people in the domain actually contribute on a daily basis. Where is the future of the positive psychology character strengths interventions leading us towards? And how can we make our future better towards a positive well-being for all? My final question, sir.
Yeah, it's good to end with a very simple question with a simple answer. Yeah, that's quite an ambitious thing. There will be a special issue by Akasha Parks. It's currently edited, which will give a collection of articles on where positive interventions will go in the future. We do contribute to, I think, or at least we have submitted to. And there are a lot of things that you can, of course, expect. I mean, we have started with positive psychology interventions, and studies got replicated, some worked out, some didn't, and then eventually we could refine things. But I don't think we have come to an end here. I think we will need to think about more types of interventions. What else can we do? What we had before, let's say, the fit between a person and an intervention, I think that's highly important. I mean, what kind of intervention does really fit to me? Someone who is perhaps in not a good shape, how do you get into an upward spiral where first training your signature strengths and then gradually building resources so that you can move on to strengths that you haven't developed so far. What I also see is that there are apps to train strengths, so that remind you to do certain things to get a little bit of a computerized version. Although I'm still more old-fashioned, I think paper pencil is good, and just going out and play with your friends is good. But if you want to use those facilities for strengths, that's basically good. I think variations of interventions will be there. I mean, how can we improve the interventions that we have by bringing variations? What's the optimal thing? For example, we thought that training 3 good things for a week works, training it for 3 weeks, or combining it with a gratitude later didn't add anything. So we need to find out more about interventions. Also, I mean, it is almost like homeopathy, the positive psychology interventions. They are so minor. You do a few things and then you get an effect. We just want to see the mechanisms, whether they work, but I think eventually we will have to combine them and see how we can get the maximal effect. Ryan Yennick has done a lot of work. He has a lot of recommendations if you want to look up his book. I especially like the combinations of interventions, which we also tested. For example, combining mindfulness interventions with strengths, and we had a study with my doctorate, Dandang Pang, where we could show that combining the two actually has good effects. So I think, I mean, we are 14 years now, it's actually 13 years after the first study. We shouldn't expect all too much, although we have accomplished already a lot. But research and especially practitioners will come up with ideas that can be tested. I think here research will have to deliver more. And in terms of improving the well-being, I think we know from personality research and from intelligence research that intelligence and personality still changes the most in the earliest years. People can change also at higher levels of age, but the changes are less extended. So I think bringing, and that was actually done with this characters education programs in schools, I think bringing the good to children in an earlier level and valuing it and not being it as old-fashioned, I think these are elements that will help a lot. We have unpublished data where we just see whether we have been with the Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, or comparable institutions already makes a difference at the level of character strengths. So I think reducing negative impact on character development and increasing factors during these sensitive ages especially will mold people into better characters in an earlier life. I think this was more common, maybe. I don't know what your perception is, but if I would talk to my grandmother about my research, then she would say, yeah, that's what we knew, that's what we always did. I think coming back to common wisdom, like, I mean, children need to go out, need to have contact with the environment, with friends. Don't bring your child to school with a car, let them, if possible at all, go with their friends. So just using the natural resources that train strengths anyway will be one element. But what positive psychology does is it provides data. It shows character is important for good outcomes for the individual, but also for the surrounding group and society. And having a terminology, understanding the strengths and seeing them as positive is something that will be proving valuable on the long run.
Thank you so much with that thought on how obviously our younger youth can actually improve their positive experiences in life. And it's nice to know that obviously the simple things in life actually do us so much benefit. And it was absolutely an honor and amazing experience to speak to yourself. Thank you so much for leaving us with those thoughts, that how positive psychology practitioners out there can actually implement the good work of people like yourself, people like Martin Seligman, other positive psychology researchers out there, and the actual time and efforts you spend into actually developing these ideas and putting them in the positive psychology domain is an absolute honourable task indeed. And again, I'd like to thank you so much for participating on behalf of Positive Wellbeing Association. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure, and it's always nice to talk to people who are interested in research in those topics. And for me, it has been, and for my group, I actually have a very gifted and interested group in Zurich. We enjoy doing this research, and of course, then we enjoy seeing that it is of use for others.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.